Hello and welcome everyone, and to another episode of the Big Idea series. A new GST reform came into effect in India from September 22nd. To talk about this with us, we have Mr. Arbind Modi. Mr. Modi is a globally recognized tax policy expert who has worked with the Ministry of Finance, IMF, and the World Bank. He played a pivotal role in the design of the GST system. Welcome, Mr. Modi.
Thank you.
Let's start. So, my first question to you is, if we think about the first version of the GST, how do we evaluate GST 1.0?
Interesting question. It's GST 1.0 itself had a lot of flaws. And did not meet the expectation that was reposed when we introduced in 2017. Neither in terms of revenue, nor in terms of reducing distortions in the tax system. So, and now GST 2 is essentially repeating the same flaws in most cases, with some some shift in some changes in the rates, but effectively they don't mean much in terms of the impact on either the revenue or on the distortions that were there under the GST 1. So I would say that this is a lot of cacophony without any meaningful changes in the GST system. Let me elaborate now. For example, if we were to evaluate any VAT or GST regime, we would use a couple of parameters to do so. First, let me see how does it improve production neutrality. Because of the absence of comprehensive input tax credit under the GST 1, the GST 1 was flawed. It was not neutral to production decisions. The same flaws continue under the GST 2, since no changes have been made in the way we allow input tax credit for capital goods and services. The distortions in GST 1 continue to exist even in GST 2. So from that perspective, there is no change. And if there is no change after 7 years, when such a significant review was being undertaken, I would say that this is a case of missed opportunity. Secondly, let's look at consumption neutrality. Even there, yes, some rates have been reduced. Rates reduced means the number of rates have been reduced to some extent, while some have been created also, in the sense that there is a new rate of 1.25 or 1.5. But not too many commodities. But the fact is that there are new rates and multiple rates continue. So therefore, there is again nothing significant in terms of reduction in consumption distortions. The third is in terms of revenue performance. We were already collecting below the 6% benchmark for GST, which was the amount that which was the level which we were collecting prior to 2017 from the taxes that were subsumed into GST. And now our performance vis-a-vis that benchmark is going to worsen with the loss of 48,000 crores projected by the government. So if you look at even on the other important aspect is that trade neutrality is another important parameter that we consider in evaluating. And unfortunately, when you have moved goods from 12 to 5, imports will now be taxed only at a 5% rate, even though the effective rate on account of denial of input tax credit is significantly higher. So that would put all domestic producers vis-a-vis their foreign competitors at a disadvantage. And in effect, what we have done is there's a bias in the system. So there's a bias in the GST system in favor of imports. So obviously that will be detrimental to the domestic producers. So given these findings, overall I think GST2 is a case of missed opportunity, and we should correct for some of these distortionary features within the GST system as quickly as possible.
Thank you for that. To our viewers, can you explain how the lack of input tax credit on services as well as capital goods affected investments and consumption?
As far as denial of input tax credit on capital goods is concerned, the GST system, when it is designed, it is intended to tax only consumption, and it is intended to be neutral to investment, right? So whenever you deny input tax credit on capital goods, you end up taxing capital goods, which means taxing investment per se. So naturally that in turn affects total factor productivity. There is multiple evidence globally to show that denial of input tax credit for capital goods results in lower factor productivity. So you have a situation where denial of input tax credit on capital goods reduces capital deepening and capital widening, and thereby impacting in growth, productivity and growth. So that's the key reason why under the GST design it is advocated that full credit should be allowed for input tax credit for input taxes on capital goods. That's one aspect of it. The second point that you raised was how does it impact consumption? You see, the point that needs to be highlighted out here is that when you have a lower rate with no input tax credit or limited input tax credit, then the effective tax rate is much higher than what it optically appears to be. Say, for example, a commodity with a 5% rate, the effective rate because of the restriction on input tax credit and refund could be as high as 12-13% or 14%, depending upon what is the share of input tax on goods, input tax on services, input taxes, capital goods, and also the share of value addition. Now, that obviously impacts, distorts consumption choices, because now it is no more transparent to the consumer, and therefore you tend to have distorted consumption choices.
Now, moving on to GST 2.0, there were many things that were announced, including shifting a lot of goods from higher tax rates to lower tax slabs. We want to understand from you what to expect in terms of how it affects the prices of goods that people consume, and more broadly also how it affects productivity and growth in the economy.
You see, as far as prices are concerned, the back of the envelope calculations shows that there could be small downward shift, but it may not be very significant. For example, let me just I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of the revenue impact, the government has projected that there would be a 48,000 crore loss in revenue. So on a base of 22 lakhs, that translates to about 2.2% of GDP. I mean, 2.2% of the revenue. Which when translated into price effect, it would mean that the price index could drop to 111.74 from 112. In other words, suppose all the goods, I mean, if you take into account, and they were at 100, the price was 100 of all the goods, and the weighted average tax rate is 12%, let's say. So you would have the price for the consumer at 112. Now that 112 will only come down to 111.76 or 75. So you can see how minimal that is. And when it is so small, then any small friction in the economy could nullify this small change. I mean, so the price effect the price effect of these changes is some kind of uncertain. I mean, I would say, I mean, certainly not very significantly moving downwards. Yes, there could be some specific commodities which could lead to a sharp decline in prices, but not on the broad range of consumption goods of consumption by the household. The price effect may not be very significant in favor of the consumer. Secondly, another way to look at the price effect would be that using empirical estimates of pass-through effects of reduction in lower VAT rates. There are studies, there are some IMF studies also, which show that when you reduce the reduced rates, that is the lower VAT rate or GST rate, the pass-through effect is only 30%. So assuming the loss arises fully from drop in the rate from 12% to 5%, and the pass-through effect is 100%, the index for those goods and services would drop to 108.6 from 115.6. So there is some change. If you believe that, if you want to, look at the impact on goods and services which were subject to tax at 12%. That is only if the pass-through is 100%. But as I said, empirically, there is evidence that it is only 30%, in which case the price would only drop from 115.6 to 113.5. So you can see that the gap is so small that it can be offset by any negative impact or any friction in the market. For example, typically your old stocks prices can't be reduced because they have been bought at purchased at much higher prices prior to the change. So clearly the seller cannot reduce the prices immediately, right? There could be issues where it's a supplier's market, so he may not pass on the benefits to the consumer. And secondly, whenever there is a high demand, I mean, say because of the price cut, if demand goes up and in the immediate short run there is no the production may not respond immediately. Higher production may not may not happen immediately. So that would mean that prices would also go up. So the fall in prices, because on the demand side, could be offset by increase in prices on account of increased demand. So the price effect is uncertain. Overall, if you see, whether you look at it from the revenue loss point of view or you look at it from empirical work, on both counts, I would say that this is not something on which we can go gung-ho ex ante. But yes, over time, what would happen is there can be more studies once there are evidence. I mean, as the market pans out, we will see. We can only do a more detailed study ex post rather than ex ante speculate on it. But I'm not very hopeful of very significant changes. And another thing, I mean, immediate changes that you see many firms announcing, that could also be partly the usual festival discounts that you have. I mean, so all of it is not necessarily triggered by a cut in the change in the rates from 12% to 5%. But yes, so over time only you will know whether these reduction in the prices were actually driven by GST cuts or were driven by the festival season. I mean, yesterday I think I saw a newspaper report on Amul cutting prices over a range of products, particularly and significant cuts. I mean, there appear to be some significant cuts, which of course the government has been kind of highlighting that. But the issue in Amul's case is that Amul hardly has any input tax credit. So the denial of input tax credit as such does not really impact them severely. So for them, the real cut is the cut from 12 to 5 is a real and substantial cut. So obviously, so they may be in a position to kind of, pass on some benefit to the consumer. And at the end, we should not forget that Amul, even though it is a cooperative of the milk producers, it is subject to a lot of control by the government. I mean, the CEOs are generally government officers. I mean, either retired or yes. So the government tends to appoint them. So there is so their decision may not reflect a market-driven decision, but more of a mandated kind of because obviously the Prime Minister has been calling for price cut, so that may be reflected in Amul's So whether it is GST induced or not is difficult to say at this stage.
Understood. And what can we expect in terms of total factor productivity and economic growth in the years ahead?
As I said, again, there is empirical evidence to suggest that allowing full full input tax credit for capital goods increases total factor productivity. And if that and when that happens, there's obviously an impetus to economic growth. To the extent the input tax credit on capital goods is not allowed under the GST regime, be it GST 1 or GST 2, or allowed but in a substantially reduced form, the growth will obviously be stunted to that extent.
No, that was very helpful. As the last point for today's agenda, if you were put in charge, what would a true reform agenda for GST look like?
Well, going forward from here, I mean, the 5%, this change is already there. It's already become effective. The medium term goal would be to move to a single rate, no doubt. But my immediate goal would be that even if at the cost of revenue loss, ensure seamless input tax credit for goods, services and capital goods, because that would improve the efficiency of the GST system and then try to make up revenue with incremental increases if required.
Okay. That was very insightful. Thank you for the conversation today, Mr. Modi.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.